Welcome to Not Factory Approved, the site where I attempt to show you many different ongoing projects. Some are worth doing, some are not. Some are successes, and some are not. Hopefully you find this helpful. Hopefully it, if nothing else, teaches you when to quit. And otherwise, sometimes you might just see a project that comes from the ashes of despair and rises like a phoenix to be something useful once again. So hopefully you find this site helpful and enjoyable, and stay tuned. Thank you. I said before that the cupboard opening was just over 28 inches. It's actually 29, and the cupboard door is 30, so I'm going to have 1 inch sticking up above, and then having the bottom of the cupboard door to the bottom of this edge here. So it's 4 3/4 inches, just under, to the top screw of this hinge. And I want 1 inch sticking up the top, so I've measured off 3 3/4 inches down from the 2x4. That's the framing of the cabinet. And then 1.5 inches in, which is what the swing is of this latch. And it's in that position. It's 1.5 inches from the cupboard door to the holes. And I'll mark the first hole, hang the door, and then mark the other holes after that. One thing this project has shown me is that there's an incredible number of styles of hinges like this. Even when they look the same, they are not. This one requires screws to detach. If you unscrew that screw, it will slide out. So you can remove the doors easily. This is another style, just quick release. It has a button there. It takes a bracket like this one, but not this one. This one fits this style, which has a flat button to push. The other one, it does not quite latch in the other one. And then there are ones that open 135 degrees, ones that open 90 degrees, ones that are quick release, ones that are not. Different manufacturers make them all differently, of course, even though they may look the same. And some are very high quality and some are very cheap. These ones are fairly cheap that I'm putting on here. I got them at Habitat for Humanity, of course, and because some of these doors came without these hinges or without all the hardware for the hinge. This one has a center place screw on the bracket, the mounting bracket, where some of them are further in. I don't have one of those right here, but again, slightly different. So be careful when you're trying to pick them up. They're not all the same. So on this side, these doors are 30 inches tall and 24 inches wide. The gap, as I said before, is 45 inches, counting the 1/2 inch for the plywood on each side. So what I'm going to do is mount the doors at the height I want. The gap is just over 28 inches top to bottom, so I'm going to try and mount them flush with the bottom plywood, the base of the cupboard, and then they will stick up about 1.5 inches at the top. Now I'm using flathead screws, which I dislike strongly, but I have a bunch of them that are just hanging around, and once those brackets are on, they're not coming off, because the hinge, you don't have to remove the bracket to remove the hinge. And the other thing I've done is I've let it hang on the top screw, so then I can just drill the hole right at the top of the hinge, and they'll be in exactly the right place, and it's pretty hard not to get them centered. Likewise on the bottom, I've marked off 1.5 inches in, drilled it at the top. I'll put a screw in there, and then I'll drill the bottom hole at the top of the slot. So here they are mounted and roughly centered, approximately 1 inch up at the top. The cupboard door is above the opening, and basically flush even down below. And then these can be adjusted easily because it's tight now. These can easily be adjusted by loosening these screws and then sliding it where you want it and tightening them up. And they have, most of them have serrations on them, so you can feel them bump by notches to adjust. So if you have two doors that are unequal lengths, these two are not, but it's the same method. I've measured the width of the border, and in this case it's 2.5 inches. There. So I know that it's 2.5 inches to that border. I'm going to have to cut off an even amount from each one. So this one's 2.5, half of that is 1 1/4. This one's 2.5, half of that is 1 1/4. Measure back 1 1/4 inch, 1 1/4. Draw a line, and that's where I cut. They might look a little goofy, but it is a shop. If it was real cabinets, then I would buy the proper doors. So this is after trimming 1 1/4 off each one. Actually worked out pretty well. It's 2.5 inches on the sides there, and it's 2.5 inches in the middle. Just happens to be shared. That worked out better than planned. And I obviously have to sand the edges yet. Still a bit rough from the table saw. The other ones, I may have to do things a little differently because they're not quite as wide as this particular cupboard. We'll see how it goes. What I'm going to do on the center doors, since they're just a little bit, the gap is a little bit smaller than the other one, I'm going to use these hinges that are offset by about 1/4 inch compared to these ones. You can see by where the screws are located. I've drilled the recess using a hole saw and a drill press, and I've moved it in 1/4 inch. So I'm going to try and trim this off, leaving about 1/16 inch there so that the hole is not visible from the edge of the door. And this is the hole saw I was using. It belongs to my son-in-law, and so fair game. So the table saw doesn't like to cut it that close. And it's not wide enough to do the whole width of the board, so the door. We'll have to fill those, I guess. There's the final product, except for paint. I like to paint them red to match the exterior of the building. And red and white is kind of a garage theme. The other side I may just paint gray. So this side is a little different than the other side. This is the carpentry side. And so what I'm going to do is I probably will paint them gray, but these are all different, slightly different doors. For instance, this one is 3 inches across here, whereas the one behind is 2 1/4. So what I did was measure off what would make this 2 1/4, which is 3/4 inch. And then I took the center line between the two and came up with this line here. So that should result in both of them being the same width. Likewise the same here. This one is 2 1/2, the one behind is 2 1/4. So mark this one so that it's the same thickness of this frame, and then take the center line between the two and cut it accordingly. Let's see how it turns out. As you can see, not a perfect job. I should have used a push stick. It bound up on me as I was going through and then went crooked and ate up the wood. Neither of them are brilliant. Much better success on the other side.